Hello, and welcome to Top Deck. This past Friday, the entire card list for Bloomburrow released, so today we're going to look at my picks for the top 10 best cards for Pioneer and Explorer. As we get going, please keep in mind I am not a pro player. While I feel good about my guesses, they will likely have the accuracy of your local weatherman. So with that, let's get into it. Starting off with the honorable mention, not because they're good, but because they are fun, I have collectively put the Otters of Bloomburrow. I am excited for these guys. These cute critters love the prowess mechanic as much as I do. Unfortunately, spell-slinging prowess decks are really hard to get right with an appropriate ratio of creature to non-creature spells. So do I expect them to be good? No. Will that stop me from trying? Not on your life. With that, let's get into the real top 10. My number 10 pick is Azure Beastbinder. It is a 2-mana 1/3 with the ability to negate the effects of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers when it attacks, which is already a pretty decent effect. It also has vigilance and cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or greater. This is really handy considering it has 3 toughness. It also has the sneaky ability to turn creatures into 2/2s that I think a lot of people are going to overlook at first. This could be very helpful against mono-green stompy decks if you were relying on damage-based removal. All in all, it's a solid card, so that's why it is number 10. At the number 9 spot, we have Fell. This is a very straightforward 2-mana sorcery that reads simply, destroy target creature. I put Fell on the list because it is unconditional creature removal. There aren't too many cards like that for 2 mana in the format, and this is the only one that comes without any downside in the text box. The problem I foresee with this card is the fact that it is a sorcery. Virtually all playable creature removal in black is instant speed. That might be enough to disqualify Fell from being playable, but we will have to wait and see. At the very least, I thought it was good enough to mention. Moving on to number 8, we have Scavenger's Talent. Scavenger's Talent is a class enchantment, so it gets better as you level it up to give it more abilities. It costs a single black to play, and its level 1 abilities to make a food when 1 or more of your creatures die each turn. That already seems like it should be good enough to stick in a cat oven deck where the entire point is to kill a cat over and over again and revive it with food. I think it could see play in sacrifice decks just for that ability. Its level 2 ability costs 2 mana to activate and lets you mill someone for 2 every time you sack a permanent. That's probably irrelevant most of the time, not gonna lie. However, its level 3 ability lets you sacrifice 3 permanents at the end of each of your turns to revive a creature from your graveyard with a finality counter on it. I could see this card bringing back a creature or 3 if a game goes long. Additionally, Scavenger's Talent's levels are not egregiously expensive to increase. It will probably be played in a lot of decks that consistently become empty-handed, so it could also act as a decent mana sink. That's why I put Scavenger's Talent at number 8. At number 7, we have Long River's Pull. At its floor, it counters a creature spell for 2 mana, which is basically Essence Scatter. However, if you allow your opponent to draw a card, you have an unconditional counterspell. I do realize this card would be competing against cards like No More Lies and Make Disappear, and that those are hard spells to be better than. However, Long River's Pull has a couple of advantages over those other cards. Firstly, it's in mono blue, which means it can go into a wider variety of decks than No More Lies. Additionally, while those other counterspells get worse over the course of the game since they give the opponent the option of paying mana to ignore them, I think Long River's Pull gets better the longer the game goes. Later in the game, your opponent is less likely to have cards in hand, so giving them 1 card at most is not the worst thing in the world. So I think this card will be a competitive counterspell in the format. And now at number 6, we have Emberheart Challenger. I can almost guarantee this will see some play since it is a hasty 2/2 for 2 with prowess. Aggressive 2-drops will always find a home somewhere, it's just their nature. Where I think the card will see the most play will be Boros Heroic. That deck wants to target aggressive creatures with pump spells to make them bigger and just steamroll opponents. What that deck lacks essentially is card draw, and Emberheart Challenger's Valiant ability would be able to help out there. Furthermore, the prowess ability would trigger even when a different creature gets targeted by a pump spell to give further value. I can easily see this as, say, a 2-of in the Heroic deck. Hey, really quick, before we move on to number 5, I'm going to take a few seconds to shamelessly self-promote. Here are a couple of my recent videos. I think people would really enjoy these if they watched them, and if you would consider doing so, it would be much appreciated. And if you don't like something about them, let me know in the comments. I want to make good content for everyone, and that's easier to do with feedback. Thanks in advance. Now on to number 5. So, entries 6 through 10 in this list I'm pretty sure would be good in Pioneer and Explorer. Entries 1 through 5, however, I am almost certain will see play. Number 5, for example, is Sunspine Lynx. When I saw this card, I immediately thought of Rampaging Ferocidon. Both cards prevent players from gaining life. Sunspine Lynx goes a step further and prevents damage from being prevented. Furthermore, while Ferocidon pings a player every time a creature ETBs, or enters as it is now called, Lynx gives an immediate burst of direct damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. I think this is better than Ferocidon since only a few decks run a lot of basic lands. Additionally, a 5/4 is a pretty decent beater in its own right. I think Lynx could just flat out replace Ferocidon in the sideboard in mono red decks, and maybe even act as a one-of in the main board as a finisher. Continuing on to number 4, we have 3 Tree City, that is. 3 Tree City is a Nykthos-style land that, for the investment of what is essentially 3 mana, lets you add mana equal to the number of creatures of a chosen type. This card should be helpful in powering up tribal strategies like goblins or mono-white humans, but I think it will be at its best in an elf tribal deck. Consider the following sequence. Turn 1 Forest, Llanowar Elf, go. Turn 2 Elvish Warmaster into Elvish Mystic, Warmaster makes an elf token. By the time you reach turn 3, 3 Tree City already nets you mana and can help you snowball way ahead of your opponent. While tribal decks are not the strongest at the moment, 3 Tree City will go a long way in powering them up. Switching from one good card in green to another, we have Innkeeper's Talent. It's another class enchantment for 1 and a green with the base ability of putting a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures at the beginning of combat. I know this card will be good from that ability alone, since Luminarch Aspirant does the same thing in mono-white humans. However, for an additional mana invested, Innkeeper's Talent gives every permanent you control with a counter on it Ward 1. That's every kind of counter, by the way, not just +1/+1. The final level doubles all counters that you would put on your creatures. That can make even a tiny elf into a game-ending threat in just a couple turns. I think this card will find a home in any green deck that wants to protect important creatures, as well as mono-green stompy decks. Next up, at the number 2 spot on the list, we have Dewdrop Cure. When I saw this card, alarm bells immediately went off in my head. It reanimates not 1, but 2 creatures for only 3 mana. Yeah, they have to be low-cost creatures, but that is not a drawback if you are already playing with a low-to-the-ground curve. You could slot this into Heroic or Humans or splash it in for Elves. But the unfortunate and inevitable home for this card is Amalia combo. You could reanimate both halves of the combo with 1 card. Heck, gift a card to your opponent and you can get back a 3rd creature like Cenote Scout to start the game-winning loop. You would have to spend at least 5 mana to do that with Return to the Ranks, which already sees play in Amalia decks. Dewdrop Cure is just a strict upgrade to Return to the Ranks, and will probably be replacing that card very, very shortly. So what's my pick for the best card in Pioneer and Explorer in Bloomburrow? It's Igra, Eater of All. Igra is just a wild card. It's a 5 mana 6/6 with the ward cost of sacrificing a food. Since it turns all other creatures into food, using a simple removal spell becomes an inherent 2-for-1. Control decks, which don't run lots of creatures, will likely have to use a Wrath to get rid of it. Furthermore, whenever a food is put into a graveyard, Igra gets 2 +1/+1 counters. And, since it turns everything into food, it literally combos with a ham sandwich. The combo I want to try the most involves Cauldron Familiar from the Cat Oven combo. If you have 1 familiar in the grave and another on the battlefield with Igra, you can loop Cauldron Familiars endlessly from the graveyard and battlefield to win the game. And with the new Camellia, the Seed Miser, you can also get infinite squirrels. I am sure Igra will spawn a whole host of new sacrifice and combo decks, and I cannot wait to try to build one of my own. You could probably make it in Golgari, Jund, or Abzan colors really easily. I am excited for this, and it is the first deck I build as soon as the new set drops on Arena. I have been saving my gold and wildcards for this specific purpose. So that about does it for me. If you like the content, make sure to like and subscribe. If you think I missed a card, please let me know in the comments below. And make sure you support your local game store by attending your pre-release this weekend. Well, that's it for me. Have a great day, everyone. See you around.